I have not seen my father in 16 years, since the night he left me at a bus station with nothing but a trash bag of clothes. Yet today, an invitation to his retirement party arrived in my mail. I am not attending to seek forgiveness, but to deliver a letter he buried. When I read the final line, the room will go silent, realizing the man they are honoring is about to be retired by the truth permanently. My name is Avery Lewis. I have been sitting in the driver's seat of my sensible, mid-range sedan for 20 minutes, watching the valet drivers park cars that cost more than my entire college education. The engine is off, but the metal hood is still ticking as it cools, a rhythmic metronome counting down the seconds until I do something irrevocable. Through the windshield, the entrance to the Silver Pines Country Club glows like a beacon of upper-middle-class self-righteousness. It is a sprawling structure of stone and timber, designed to make people feel important simply by standing near it. A massive banner is draped across the limestone pillars, flapping slightly in the Pennsylvania breeze. Even from 50 yards away, the font is aggressive, gold cursive on a white background. Happy Retirement, Gordon Lewis. The name looks foreign to me. It belongs to a stranger. Or perhaps, more accurately, it belongs to a ghost who haunts a house I was locked out of a lifetime ago. On the passenger seat, resting on the worn leather, is a thick envelope. It is not the pristine, cream-colored invitation that arrived in my mailbox 3 days ago. That invitation was printed on heavy cardstock with embossed lettering, smelling faintly of lavender and old money. This envelope is different. This one is old. The edges are yellowed, curling inward like dying leaves. The paper feels brittle to the touch, as if it has been baked in a dry heat for years. The seal has been broken, the red wax cracked down the middle. The handwriting on the front is faint, written in blue ink that has faded over time, but the message is still legible. It is a handwriting I have not seen since I was a child, but my body recognizes it before my brain does. If you are reading this, it means he hid it from everyone. I look back at the banner. 16 years. That is how long it has been since I saw the man inside that building. 16 years since the night the sky opened up over the tri-state area, drenching the cracked asphalt of the Greyhound station. The memory does not fade. It sharpens with time. I can still smell the diesel fumes mixed with the ozone of the storm. I can still feel the physical weight of the black plastic trash bag cutting into my palm. It contained 3 pairs of jeans, 5 shirts, a toothbrush, and a pair of knockoff sneakers. My entire life, packed like refuse. I remember the sound of the rain hammering against the roof of his car that night. Gordon Lewis did not look at me. He kept the engine running, the windshield wipers slapping back and forth, erasing the world outside. He did not get out to hug me goodbye. He did not offer me money. He did not offer me advice. He just unlocked the passenger door and waited for me to step out into the downpour. "You have humiliated this family, Avery," he had said. His voice was not angry. It was worse. It was indifferent. It was the voice of a man filing a tax return, the voice of a bureaucrat denying a claim. It was the voice of the Hartwell County Benefits Office, not a father discarding his child. I stood there as his taillights faded into the mist, red eyes blinking shut in the darkness. I was 18 years old. I had $70 in my pocket. I had no idea why I was really being exiled. I thought it was just me. I thought I was broken. I thought I was simply unlovable. For 16 years, I carried that shame. I watered it, I fed it, and I let it grow into a thick, thorny hedge that kept everyone else out. I waited tables at 24-hour diners where the coffee tasted like burnt rubber. I took night classes while my eyes burned from exhaustion. I clawed my way into Northline compliance, building a career out of finding the lies other people tried to hide. I became an expert in fraud, in deceit, in the little discrepancies that bring down empires. I thought I had left Gordon Lewis behind. Then came the invitation. It arrived on a Tuesday. The postmark was local. When I saw his name, my first instinct was to burn it in the kitchen sink. I wanted to watch his name curl into ash, but then I saw the note clipped to the back of the RSVP card. It was not from him. It was a prompt, a summon. Gordon Lewis, the pillar of the community, the man who dedicated 40 years to public service, the man who is being toasted tonight with champagne and speeches about integrity. It felt like a physical blow, a slap across the face that left my skin burning. They are celebrating a monster. They are clapping for a fiction, to the town of Briar Glen. He is the benevolent administrator who ensured the elderly received their checks and the needy found support. To me, he is the silhouette in a departing car. I am not here to scream. I am not here to flip tables or throw wine or make a scene that will be whispered about at bridge clubs for the next 3 months. That is what a child would do. That is what the unstable daughter he describes would do. I am a grown woman now. I am 34 years old. I work in compliance. I deal in facts, in paper trails, in the cold, hard reality of numbers. I do not operate on emotion. I operate on evidence. I pick up the yellowed envelope again. My fingers trace the familiar loop of the L in my name. The paper feels heavy, heavier than paper should be. It carries the weight of a dead woman's conscience. I slide the letter out. Just one sheet. The paper is so dry I'm afraid it might disintegrate if I breathe on it too hard. I do not need to read the whole thing again. I have memorized every curve of the ink in the hour since I found it. But I need to see it. I need to remind myself that this is real, that I am not hallucinating from the stress. I read the first paragraph. My breath hitches. The air in the car feels suddenly too thin, as if the luxury of the Silver Pines Country Club is sucking the oxygen out of the surrounding atmosphere. My hands start to tremble, vibrating against the steering wheel. It is not fear. It is a rage so cold it feels like ice water in my veins. It is the kind of anger that clarifies your vision, that sharpens the edges of the world. I look up at the club entrance again. I see a man in a tuxedo laughing near the door, slapping another man on the back. It looks like him from a distance, the same broad shoulders, the same perfectly coiffed silver hair, but it is just a guest. It does not matter. He is in there. He is drinking scotch. Probably a single malt aged 18 years the same age I was when he threw me away. He is accepting handshakes. He is smiling that practiced, benevolent smile. He thinks he has won. He thinks the 18-year-old girl at the bus station vanished into the ether, swallowed by the poverty he sentenced her to. He thinks he is safe. I fold the letter and tuck it into the inside pocket of my blazer, right against my heart. It feels like carrying a weapon. I check my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face is pale, but my eyes are dry. Good. Tears are for the grieving, and I am done grieving. I am not a victim tonight. I am a consequence. I open the door and step out into the cool evening air. The gravel creates a satisfying crunch under my heels, a sound like small bones breaking. The valet attendant looks at me, confused, perhaps wondering why I parked my own car. Why I am standing here with such intensity. I ignore him. I smooth down the front of my jacket. I can hear the music drifting from the ballroom now, a soft jazz number that sounds like money and complacency. I start walking toward the light. Every step is a reclamation. Every step is for the girl shivering on the bench at the Greyhound station. Every step is for the mother who was silenced. Gordon Lewis is about to receive his retirement gift. He thinks he is retiring from a job, but he is about to retire from his life. As I reach the heavy oak doors, I pause for 1 second. The final sentence of my mother's letter echoes in my mind, louder than the jazz, louder than the chatter of the wealthy, louder than my own heartbeat. It is the sentence that drove me here, the sentence that turned a family tragedy into a federal crime scene, the sentence that makes my blood run cold. Your name was used to cover the crime. My life at Northline Compliance is defined by a single, unyielding principle, which is to follow the money and find the rot. My official job title is Senior Compliance Investigator, but what I really am is a professional cynic. I spend 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, staring at dual monitors in a climate-controlled office in Philadelphia, looking for the cracks in corporate facades. I hunt for the ghost employees on payrolls, the vendor payments that loop back into executive pockets, and the offshore accounts disguised as charitable foundations. Most people look at a spreadsheet and see numbers. I look at a spreadsheet and see human greed codified into rows and columns. I am good at my job. I am exceptional at it. My supervisors think it is because I have a sharp mind for forensic accounting. But they are wrong. I am good at spotting liars because I was raised by the best one in the state. My apartment reflects this obsession with order. It is a one-bedroom unit on the 4th floor of a quiet building. The walls are painted a stark, clinical white. The furniture is functional, gray, and modern. There are no knickknacks, no souvenir magnets on the fridge, and absolutely no photographs. A stranger walking in might think nobody lives there, or that the occupant is in the process of moving out. That is exactly how I like it. I do not accumulate clutter. I do not accumulate attachments. To me, the word family is not a source of comfort. It is a synonym for betrayal. It is a biological trap that people walk into willingly, convinced that shared DNA creates an obligation of love. I learned 18 years ago that DNA is just a chemical sequence, not a contract. When I leave work, I do not go out for drinks with colleagues. I do not date. I go to the gym. I run until my lungs burn, and then I go home to read or work. It is a disciplined, solitary existence. Some might call it lonely. I call it safe. In my world, if you do not let anyone in, nobody can throw you out. This armor did not appear overnight. It was forged in the fires of the years that followed my expulsion from Briar Glen. When Gordon Lewis drove away that night, he did not just leave me without a home. He left me without an identity. I was 18 years old with no credit history, no address, and $70 to my name. The first few years were a blur of exhaustion and humiliation. I worked as a waitress at a 24-hour diner off the interstate, a place where the coffee tasted like battery acid and the truckers tipped in quarters. I learned to sleep in 2-hour shifts. I learned which grocery stores discounted their bread after 9 at night. I rented a room above a garage that smelled perpetually of gasoline and mildew for $200 a month. I put myself through community college, then state university, one credit at a time. I took out $40,000 in student loans because I had no cosigner. I worked days. I worked nights. I aged 10 years in the span of 4. I hardened. The soft, hopeful girl who used to draw pictures for her father dissolved, replaced by a woman who knew that the only person coming to save her was herself. During those early, desperate years, I broke my own rule twice. I reached out. The first time was 6 months after he left me. I was sick with a fever of 102 degrees, shivering in that garage apartment, terrified and delirious. I called the house landline. He picked up on the second ring. I barely got the word Dad out of my throat before his voice cut through the line, cold and sharp as a scalpel. "I told you not to call," he said. Then the line went dead. The second time was 2 years later. I had just been accepted into the accounting program. I thought maybe, if I showed him I was making something of myself, if I showed him I was not the failure he said I was, he might care. I wrote a letter. It came back 2 weeks later, unopened, with refused scrawled across the front in thick red marker. That was the day I stopped being his daughter and started being his judge. There was only one person in that entire town who had ever looked at me with anything resembling love, and that was my grandmother, Ruth. She was my mother's mother. She smelled of peppermint and old books. She used to sneak me candy when my father forbade sugar, and she would tell me stories about my mother, Evelyn, who died when I was just a toddler. But Ruth was in a nursing home by the time I was kicked out, her mind slowly being eroded by dementia. I tried to visit her once, a year after I left. The nurses told me she had passed away 3 months prior. Gordon had held a private funeral. He had not listed me in the obituary. I had been erased from the family record before the earth had even settled on her grave. I believed that chapter of my life was closed. I believed I had successfully cauterized the wound. Then, the invitation arrived. It was Tuesday evening. I had just come home from a 12-hour shift investigating a kickback scheme at a construction firm. The mail was sitting on the counter. The envelope was heavy. Expensive cream cardstock. I almost threw it away. thinking it was a wedding invite for someone I barely knew. Then I saw the return address, Silver Pines Country Club, and below it, the event title, The Retirement Celebration of Gordon Lewis. My first reaction was physical nausea. The audacity of it was breathtaking. To send an invitation to the daughter he had discarded, asking her to watch him be fated by the town he had duped, it felt like a power move. A reminder that he was up there, successful and beloved, while I was down here, the forgotten stain on his reputation. I was about to rip it in half when I felt something stiff inside the envelope, behind the RSVP card. I pulled it out. It was a smaller note, written on plain white paper. The handwriting was not the blocky, assertive script of my father. It was loopy, delicate, and slanted to the right. It was handwriting I had spent hours tracing with my finger in old photo albums. "You should come. There is something that belongs to you." I stared at the paper until the words blurred. The handwriting belonged to Evelyn Lewis, my mother. My mother has been dead for 30 years. I sat down on my kitchen floor, my back against the dishwasher. I must have looked at that note for an hour. I analyzed it like I analyzed forged signatures at work. The loop of the Y, the cross of the T. It was perfect, but it was impossible. Ghosts do not write notes. Ghosts do not send mail. Unless the note was written a long time ago. My investigator brain kicked into gear, overriding the emotional shock. If this note was from my mother, it meant it was written before she died. That meant someone had held on to it for 3 decades. Someone had waited until this specific moment, the week of Gordon Lewis's retirement, to slip it into an invitation and send it to me. Who sent this Gordon would never invite me. He wanted me gone. He wanted me erased. I stood up and grabbed the envelope again. I looked closely at the postage meter stamp. It was not mailed from the Lewis residence. It was not mailed from the country club. It was mailed from a commercial bulk postage account. I went to my laptop. I typed in the permit number from the stamp. It took me 15 minutes to trace it. The permit was registered to Ketter. Finch Associates. I knew that name. Miles Ketter was the family lawyer. He was the man who handled the wills, the estates, and, crucially, the pension funds for the county employees. Why would the family lawyer send me an invitation that my father would certainly despise? And where did he get a note written by a woman who died in the 90s? The pieces did not fit. My father was retiring. A lawyer was reaching out behind his back. A dead mother's handwriting was summoning me home. In my line of work, we have a saying, "Coincidence takes a lot of planning." This was not a random act of kindness. This was a leak. Someone at that law firm knew something. Someone was trying to hand me a weapon, but they were too afraid to pull the trigger themselves. I looked at the date on the invitation. The party was this Saturday. I walked to my window and looked out at the city lights of Philadelphia. I had spent 16 years running away from Briar Glen. I had built a fortress of solitude to keep the pain out, but the investigator in me could not let this go. There was a discrepancy in the ledger of my life, and I could not rest until I balanced it. The note said there was something that belonged to me. I owned nothing in that town. My father had made sure of that. So, if my mother thought I had a claim to something, it had to be something Gordon had stolen. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for Northline Compliance's HR department. I left a voicemail saying I would be taking personal leave starting immediately. Then I went to my closet and pulled out the black dress I wore to funerals. It seemed appropriate. I was going back to Briar Glen. But I was not going to celebrate a retirement. I was going to perform an autopsy on a lie. I packed a bag, I packed the invitation, and I packed the small, terrifying note written in the hand of a ghost. I did not know what I would find in Pennsylvania, but I knew one thing for sure. The Avery Lewis, who cried at the bus station, was gone. The woman driving back was coming for answers, and she brought receipts. The office of Ketter. Finch and Associates smelled of lemon polish and decay. It was located in a brick building on the edge of the historic district in Briar Glen, the kind of place that had not updated its decor since the Reagan administration. I walked in at 2 p.m, my heels sinking into the plush, dark green carpet. The receptionist, a woman who looked like she had been part of the furniture for 40 years, did not ask for my name. She just pointed toward the heavy oak door at the end of the hall. Miles Ketter was waiting for me. He was a small man, shrunken by age. Sitting behind a desk that was far too large for him, he looked like a tortoise who had lost his shell, vulnerable and wrinkled. When I entered, he did not stand up. He just gestured to the leather chair opposite him. His hands were shaking slightly as he adjusted his spectacles. "You look like her," he said. His voice was dry, like paper rubbing together. "You have Evelyn's eyes." I sat down, keeping my back straight, my posture defensive. I was not there for nostalgia. I was there for answers. "I received the invitation, Mr. Ketter," I said, "and the note. I assume you are the one who sent it." He nodded slowly. "I did. It was time." "Time for what?" I asked. "My father is retiring. Is that the trigger?" "Why now?" Miles sighed. A long, rattling sound. He reached under his desk and pulled out a cardboard banker's box. It was dusty, with the corners reinforced by tape that had yellowed and peeled with age. He placed it on the desk between us. It landed with a heavy thud, the sound of history demanding to be heard. "Your mother, Evelyn, came to see me 3 weeks before she died," Miles said. He refused to meet my gaze, focusing instead on the brass lamp on his desk. "She was terrified. Avery, she gave me this box and made me swear an oath. She said that if anything happened to her, I was to keep this safe, and she gave me a specific instruction I was only to give it to you if Gordon ever left his position at the county. She said as long as he was in power, you would not be safe with this information, but once he retired, once he was out of the system, she thought you might have a chance." I looked at the box. "A chance to do what?" "To understand," Miles said. I reached forward and opened the lid. The smell of old paper wafted up, dry and musty. Inside, there was a chaotic jumble of documents. I pulled out the first stack. They were photocopies of pension fund ledgers from the Hartwell County Benefits Office. The dates went back 30 years. My investigator instincts kicked in immediately. I scanned the columns. These were standard disbursement sheets, listing names, social security numbers, and monthly payout amounts. But as I flipped through them, I noticed annotations in the margins tiny, frantic scribbles in red ink, circles around specific names, question marks next to routing numbers. Then I found the bank statements. They were from a bank called Sovereign Keystone, a regional institution that had been bought out a decade ago. The statements were for an account holder named Avery Elizabeth Lewis. I froze. I stared at the date on the first statement. It was dated 16 years ago. The month was October. "This is impossible," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "This account was opened the week after my 18th birthday, the week after he kicked me out." I looked at the opening balance. It was not zero. It was $50,000. I looked up at Miles. "I was sleeping in a garage," I said, the anger rising in my throat like bile. "I was eating expired bread. I was borrowing money to buy toothpaste. And you are telling me I had $50,000 in a bank account." "You did not have it," Miles corrected gently. "The account was in your name, yes, but you were not the signatory. It was a custodial account that converted to a standard checking account upon your majority, but the access credentials were diverted." I flipped to the next page. Withdrawal, withdrawal, transfer. The money did not stay. It flowed in and out like a tide, large sums, 10,000 here, 15,000 there, all of it moving under my name. He used me, I realized. The horror was cold and clarifying. He did not just kick me out because he was ashamed of me. He kicked me out because he needed a ghost. He needed an identity he could control. Someone who was technically an adult but completely absent. He used my social security number to wash the money. Miles nodded. He looked pained. Gordon was creative with his accounting. He managed the pension funds for the entire county. Sometimes, beneficiaries died without next of kin. Sometimes, funds were unclaimed. Gordon found a way to redirect those funds, but he needed a place to park them before moving them to his offshore entities. He needed a clean name. "So he made me disappear," I said. He abandoned me at a bus station so I wouldn't be around to ask why I was getting bank statements. He kept me poor so I wouldn't have the resources to check my own credit report. It was a masterstroke of cruelty. It was efficient. It was evil. "There is more," Miles said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, silver key. It looked like a standard safety deposit box key. Evelyn knew something was wrong even back then. She didn't know the full extent you were just a baby when she died, but she knew Gordon was moving money. She wrote a letter. Avery, a detailed confession of what she had found. "Where is it?" I asked. "Is it in the box?" Miles shook his head. "No." She brought that letter to the hospital with her. She wanted to give it to her sister. "Your aunt." But she passed before she could. The letter was in her personal effects. I saw it. It was addressed to the district attorney. He paused, swallowing hard. But at the funeral, it vanished. Gordon was the only one with access to her room afterwards. I believe he found it. I believe he took it. I sat back, the leather chair creaking. My father had not just stolen money. He had stolen the truth about his own wife. For 16 years, he had held on to that letter. He must have kept it as a reminder, or perhaps as insurance, terrified that if he destroyed it, some copy might surface. He was a hoarder of secrets. "So what is this?" I asked, holding up the key. "Your mother was not a fool," Miles said. "She suspected Gordon might intercept her, so she made a backup. 2 days before she went into the hospital, she rented a box at First National. She paid the fees for 50 years in advance. She gave me this key and told me to hide it in the file until Gordon retired. She said, 'If he is still powerful, he will destroy the evidence. If he is retired, he is just a citizen. Then Avery can strike.'" I took the key. It felt cold against my palm. "Why didn't you help me?" I asked. "When I was 18, when I was starving, you knew this. You knew he was using my name. I was his lawyer." "Avery," Miles whispered, "attorney-client privilege is a stranglehold, and I was afraid of him. Gordon Lewis can destroy a man with a phone call. I am a coward. I know that, but I'm trying to make it right now." I stood up. I did not thank him. He did not deserve my gratitude. He was just another man who had watched a child suffer and done nothing until it was safe for him. "I am taking the box," I said. "Take it," Miles said. "God help you." I left the office and walked 2 blocks to First National Bank. The air outside was crisp, but I was sweating. My mind was racing, connecting dots that had been scattered for half a lifetime. The rejection, the silence, the cruelty. It was never about me being a rebellious teenager. It was always about the ledger. I was a liability that had been converted into an asset. The bank was a stark contrast to the lawyer's office. It was bright, sterile, and full of polished steel. I showed the key to the clerk. She checked the number against a master list. "Box 402, she said. "We have not had anyone access this box since 1994. She led me into the vault. It was a room of heavy silence, lined from floor to ceiling with metal drawers. She unlocked her side, then let me insert my key. The lock turned with a smooth, heavy click. She slid the long metal box out and carried it to a private viewing room. "Take your time," she said, closing the door behind her. I was alone. I sat at the small table and stared at the metal container. This was it. The time capsule my mother had launched before I could even speak in full sentences. I opened the lid. Inside, there was a large manila envelope, sealed with tape that had turned brown and brittle. Next to it was a small electronic device, a USB drive. I frowned. A USB drive? In 1994, no. That was impossible. USB drives did not exist then. I picked it up. It was a chunky, early model flash drive, maybe from the early 2000s. It looked scratched and worn. My heart hammered against my ribs. If this drive was in the box, it meant someone had accessed this box after my mother died. Someone else had a key. Or my mother didn't put this here. I looked at the piece of paper taped to the top of the manila envelope. It was my mother's handwriting. "Do not read this alone." I ignored the warning. I had been alone for 16 years. I was not going to wait for a partner now. I ripped open the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, covered in the same frantic, beautiful script I had seen on the invitation note. But the ink was different. It was shaky. I read the first line. My dearest Avery, if you are reading this, then they have told you I died of a heart attack. That is the first lie. The room spun. A heart attack. That was the story. A sudden, tragic cardiac event at the age of 32. Everyone said it was a genetic defect. Gordon had played the grieving widower perfectly, receiving casseroles and sympathy cards by the truckload. I forced myself to read the next sentence. I found the pills in his desk. He has been crushing them into my tea. I am writing this while he is at work because my hands are finally steady enough to hold the pen. I covered my mouth to stifle a scream. He didn't just steal. He didn't just defraud the county. He killed her. He slowly, methodically poisoned my mother because she found out about the money. And then, the USB drive. I looked at it again. If my mother died in '94, she could not have put this drive here. I turned the envelope over. There was another note on the back, written in a different hand, a jagged, hasty scrawl. I found her key. I added the proof. R. Ruth, my grandmother. She hadn't just been a sweet old lady with dementia. She had known. She must have found the key among my mother's things before Gordon did. She must have come here, years later, before her mind went, and added something she found. I pulled my laptop out of my bag. My hands were shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to plug the USB drive into the port. The computer chimed. A window popped up. There was only one folder on the drive. It was not named Evidence. It was not named Accounts. The folder was named GL. I hovered the mouse over it. I knew what was inside. I knew that clicking that folder would be the point of no return. This wasn't just about money anymore. This wasn't just about abandonment. This was a murder investigation, and the statute of limitations on murder never expires. I stared at the screen, the blue light reflecting in my eyes. I thought about the party happening right now at Silver Pines. I thought about Gordon raising a glass of champagne. You killed her, I whispered to the empty room, and you used my name to pay for the funeral. I clicked the folder. I drove straight from the bank to the only place I knew was safe, which was the apartment of Marcus Chen, a former colleague from Northline who had moved into freelance data security. I knew I said there were no people in my life, and that was mostly true. But Marcus was different. He was not a friend in the emotional sense. He was a transactional ally. I had saved his career once when a client tried to scapegoat him for a breach, and he owed me, in my world, a debt is more reliable than a friendship. His apartment in South Philadelphia was dark, illuminated only by the glow of 3 monitors and a server rack humming in the corner. I did not waste time with pleasantries. I handed him the chunky, scratched USB drive I had retrieved from the safety deposit box. Don't ask where I got it, I said, my voice steady. Just tell me what is on it. And Marcus, do not copy anything to your local drive. Read-only mode. Marcus looked at the drive, then at me. He saw the tension in my jaw, the way my hands were clenched at my sides. He nodded and plugged it into an isolated laptop he used for malware analysis. The drive was old, formatted in a file system that had been obsolete for a decade, but the data was intact. My grandmother, Ruth, might have been losing her mind at the end, but she had been meticulous before the dementia took hold. She had scanned everything. Okay, Marcus said, his fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard. It looks like a mix of file types. Scanned images, some old spreadsheet formats, and a lot of email archives exported as text files. The dates range from 1998 to 2008. Open the spreadsheets first, I commanded. He clicked a file named Ledger Master Adj. The screen filled with rows and columns. To an untrained eye, it would look like boring administrative data. To me, it looked like a confession. I leaned in, my eyes scanning the headers. Hartwell County Benefits Office, pension distribution, survivor benefits, disability adjustments, my father's department. Filter by the outgoing routing numbers, I said. Look for recurring payments to entities that are not individuals. Marcus ran the script. The list shrank. We were left with 3 recurring names that appeared over and over again for a decade: Briar Glen Actuarial Services, Keystone Consulting Group, and Pinnacle Case Management. Run those names, I told him. State registry. It took 30 seconds. They don't exist, Marcus said, his tone shifting from bored to intrigued. No business licenses, no tax IDs. They are shell entities. But look at the amounts. Avery, $4,000 here, $6,000 there. It is structured to stay under the $10,000 reporting threshold. Microstructuring, I muttered. He was siphoning off the pension fund in small bites so the federal auditors wouldn't trigger an automatic flag. Over 20 years, that adds up to millions. Wait, Marcus said. There is a subfolder here labeled Beneficiary Changes. It contains PDF scans. He opened the folder. There were dozens of files. He clicked on one dated October 14th, 16 years ago, my 18th birthday. The document was a standard change of beneficiary and custodian form for a supplementary retirement trust. It authorized the transfer of ownership from a holding account to a private individual. The name of the individual was Avery Elizabeth Lewis. But it was the bottom of the page that made the room stop spinning. There, in the signature box, was my electronic signature. It was a digital stamp, the kind used by the county office for internal approvals, authorized by my Social Security number. I stared at it. I had never signed that document. I had never even seen it. On the day that document was time-stamped, I was sitting on a bench at the Greyhound station, crying into a trash bag of clothes. He verified it, Marcus whispered, pointing to the metadata. Look, the verification IP address is the internal network of the benefits office. Administrator override. I felt a physical jolt in my chest, like a rib snapping. The narrative I had told myself for 16 years that my father was a cruel, rigid man who hated me for being rebellious shattered. That was not the story. That was the cover. He did not kick me out because I was a disappointment. He kicked me out because he needed a clean identity to launder the money he had been stealing since my mother found out. He needed me destitute. He needed me homeless. If I had stayed home, if I had gone to college on his dime, I might have applied for a student loan. I might have checked my credit score. I might have seen the millions of dollars flowing through accounts tagged with my Social Security number. By throwing me onto the street, he ensured I was too busy surviving to look at the paperwork. He weaponized my poverty to protect his theft. He framed me, I said. The words tasted like ash. If this scheme ever blew up, the paper trail leads to me. I am the beneficiary. I am the account holder. He is just the administrator who processed the valid request of his adult daughter. Avery, Marcus said, looking at me with genuine concern. This is federal wire fraud. This is embezzlement. If you take this to the local police, they might bury it. Your father is a big deal in that town, right? He is the town, I said. I need the feds. I pulled out my phone. Through my work at Northline, I had access to a secure whistleblower channel used for reporting corporate malfeasance that crossed state lines. I did not just have a tip. I had a forensic package. I typed a message to a contact I had never met in person, but whose reputation was legendary in compliance circles. Agent Dana Harlow, FBI, White Collar Crimes Division, Subject Hartwell County Pension Fund, immediate action required. I have the ledger. I attached 3 files: the shell company transfers, the forged signature, and a scan of my mother's deathbed letter from the box. 30 minutes later, my phone rang. The number was blocked. This is Harlow, a woman's voice said. She sounded tired but sharp, like a knife that had been used too many times. I reviewed the files. Where are you? I am in Philadelphia, I said. But I am heading to Briar Glen. Do not go to the house, she ordered. Meet me at the Turnpike rest stop at mile marker 42. We need to talk before you do anything stupid. I met Agent Harlow 2 hours later. She was sitting in a gray sedan in the far corner of the parking lot, away from the trucks. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with severe features and eyes that scanned the perimeter constantly. She did not shake my hand. She just unlocked the passenger door. I sat inside. The car smelled of stale coffee. "This is solid," Harlow said, tapping a tablet on her lap where my files were displayed. "The signature match is the nail in the coffin. We have been looking at the Hartwell Fund for 6 months. The numbers didn't add up. But we couldn't find the leak. We didn't know he was using a family member as a mule." "He is retiring this Saturday," I said. "The party is at Silver Pines." Harlow nodded grimly. "We know, and that is the problem. Our intel says he is cashing out. He has structured a lump sum withdrawal of his own accumulated benefits, which is actually the stolen money he washed back into his own legitimate account. If he signs the final release papers at that party, and the wire transfer hits the international banking system, he is gone. He will be in a non-extradition country before Monday morning. So arrest him now," I said. "We can't," Harlow said. "Not yet. If we arrest him today, his lawyers will claim the transfers were administrative errors. They will claim identity theft. They will muddy the waters. We need to catch him executing the final step. We need him to sign the release of funds with the intent to abscond. That proves the fraud was conscious and active." She looked at me. "We need him to feel safe. We need him to walk into that party thinking he has gotten away with it, and then we need to intercept him before he leaves the building." I looked out the window at the highway traffic rushing by. I thought about the letter in my pocket. I thought about the years I spent hungry. I thought about the way he looked at me in the rain like I was garbage. "I have a better idea," I said. Harlow raised an eyebrow. "I am not in the business of dramatic revenge. Ms. Lewis, I am in the business of conviction." "You want a conviction?" I asked. "You want him to confess if you arrest him quietly. He will lawyer up and you will be in court for 5 years. But if you let me go in there, if you let me rattle him, he will make a mistake. He is arrogant. Agent Harlow. He thinks I am broken. He thinks I'm stupid. If I walk in there and show him I know, he won't call a lawyer. He will try to destroy me. And when he does, he will reveal everything." Harlow stared at me for a long time. She was assessing me, weighing the risk. She saw the coldness in my face, the absolute lack of fear. She realized I was not a civilian caught in the crossfire. I was a weapon she could aim. "The party starts at 7, Harlow said. "My team will be in the van outside. You have 10 minutes inside. If you can get him to publicly acknowledge the documents, or if you can get him to try to silence you, we have probable cause to enter and seize the devices immediately." "I don't just want him arrested," I said. "I want his reputation dead before the handcuffs go on. He used his good name to kill my mother and steal my life. I am taking that name back." Harlow handed me a small earpiece. "Wear this. If things go south, if he gets violent, we come in. But Avery, do not let him leave that room with the money." "He isn't leaving with anything," I said. "He is already bankrupt. He just doesn't know it yet." I got back into my car. The plan was formed. I wasn't just crashing a party. I was walking into a lion's den with a stake in one hand and a whip in the other. I would let him climb up on his pedestal. I would let him bathe in the applause. I would let him think he was the king of Briar Glen, and then, right when he reached for the crown, I would show him that the floor was made of trapdoors. I started the engine. The drive to Silver Pines would take another 30 minutes. I used the time to rehearse. I didn't rehearse a speech. I rehearsed my breathing. I rehearsed the way I would stand. I rehearsed the way I would look at my sister. Brielle, the one he kept, the one he loved. I wondered if she knew. I wondered if she was part of it. It didn't matter. Tonight, everyone was going to learn the difference between a retirement party and a reckoning. Revenge, I have learned, is not a crime of passion. Passion is messy. Passion leaves fingerprints. Passion screams and cries, and throws objects that can be used as evidence against you in a court of law. True revenge, the kind that leaves your enemy with nothing. Not even their dignity, is an administrative process. It requires paperwork, logistics, and the cold, hard discipline of an auditor closing a file. I sat at the small desk in the generic hotel room I had rented on the outskirts of Briar Glen. The curtains were drawn to block out the late afternoon sun. The only light came from the desk lamp and the glow of my portable printer. I was preparing the kill shot. I did not want to hurt Gordon Lewis physically. I did not want to burn his house down or key his car. Those were the actions of a wounded child. I wanted something far more permanent. I wanted to dismantle the myth of him. I wanted to take the story he had told for 40 years, the story of the selfless public servant, the devoted father, the pillar of the community, and rewrite it with red ink. I organized the documents into 3 identical sets. The first set was for Agent Dana Harlow and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This was the legal set. It contained the raw data, the metadata logs from the USB drive, the banking routing numbers, and the affidavit I had drafted regarding the unauthorized use of my identity. This set was the chain that would bind his wrists. The second set was the backup. I would leave this in a locker at the bus station, the same station where he abandoned me, and mail the key to a journalist at the Philadelphia Inquirer. If something happened to me, if Gordon tried to silence me the way he silenced my mother, this set would ensure that his destruction would outlive me. The third set was the display. This was for the party. This was for the guests. I selected the most damning pages, the deathbed letter from my mother, the forged beneficiary change form with my 18-year-old signature, and the spreadsheet showing the shell companies. I placed them in a sleek black leather portfolio. I wanted them to look professional. I wanted them to look like an official report, not a scrapbook of grievances. Once the printing was done, I moved to the mirror. It was time for the rehearsal. I held a copy of my mother's letter. The paper was fresh white copy paper, not the yellowed original, but the words were the same. I needed to be able to read them without my voice cracking. I needed to read them without tears blurring my vision. If I cried, the room would see a hysterical daughter with daddy issues. If I was cold, they would see a witness. My dearest Avery, I read aloud to my reflection. My voice wavered on the name. I stopped. I took a breath. I started again. My dearest Avery, better. If you are reading this, then they have told you I died of a heart attack. I read the letter 10 times, then 20, then 30. I read it until the words lost their emotional stinging power and became just sounds, just syllables arranged in a sequence. I desensitized myself to my own mother's murder. It was a cruel thing to do to her memory, perhaps, but I told myself she would understand. She didn't leave this letter for me to mourn over. She left it for me to use. By the 40th time, I could read the sentence, "He has been crushing them into my tea," with the same flat effect I used to read a quarterly compliance report. Satisfied with my performance, I turned my attention to the battlefield. I opened my laptop and pulled up the event page for the retirement gala. It was disgusting in its opulence. The Silver Pines Country Club had posted a preview of the seating chart. 180 guests. I scanned the names: the mayor, the city council president, 3 judges, the CEO of the largest construction firm in the county. These were not just friends. They were accomplices. Witting or unwitting, they were the people who had benefited from Gordon's smooth operation of the county funds. They were the people who had looked the other way when a teenage girl disappeared from town because Gordon told them she was troubled. They were going to be my audience, but my eyes lingered on one name at the top of the organizing committee list: Brielle Lewis. My sister, well, technically my half-sister, though we grew up thinking we were full siblings until I was 12 and found a birth certificate that didn't match the timeline. She was 4 years younger than me. When I was kicked out, she was 14. She had stood on the porch, watching through the window as I dragged my trash bag down the driveway. She hadn't come out. She hadn't waved. For years. I hated her for that. I lumped her in with him. But as I stared at her name on the screen, a memory surfaced, sharp and uncomfortable. 2 years ago, I had been promoted at Northline, and my profile was featured in a niche industry newsletter. Somehow, Brielle had seen it. She had found my number, I still don't know how, and sent me a single text message. "Don't come back. Avery, You don't understand him. You don't understand what the house is like now. I had never replied. I had assumed it was a threat. Don't come back, or else. But looking at it now, with the knowledge of the poison and the theft, I wondered, was it a threat, or was it a warning? You don't understand what the house is like now. Did she know? Was she a victim too? Trapped in that mausoleum with a man who could kill his wife and sell his daughter? Or was she his protégé? She was organizing the party. After all, she was the one ensuring his legacy was celebrated. I decided to treat her as a hostile. I could not afford to trust her. If she was innocent, I would apologize later. If she was guilty, she would go down with the ship. Now, the logistics of insertion. I could not walk in the front door. I had an invitation, yes, but if I presented it at the check-in desk, the greeters who were surely briefed by Gordon's team would flag me. Security would escort me out before I even saw the champagne tower. I needed to be inside, in the room, invisible until the moment I chose to be seen. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a name from my waitressing days, Elena. Elena now ran a high-end staffing agency that supplied servers for events at Silver Pines. We had bonded over shared trauma in the trenches of the service industry years ago. Avery, she answered, surprised. I haven't heard from you since you moved to Philly. Is everything okay? I need a favor, Elena, I said. A big one, and a quiet one. I'm listening. I need to work the Lewis retirement party tomorrow night. General service, tray passing, anything that gets me on the floor. There was a pause. Avery, you're a compliance officer now. You make 6 figures. Why do you want to pass crab cakes to old men for $15 an hour? I have a personal matter to settle with the host, I said. I won't cause a scene that blows back on you. I promise. I just need access. Elena was smart. She didn't ask for details. She knew my history vaguely. She knew I had family issues. I have a girl who called in sick with the flu this morning, Elena said slowly. I haven't filled the slot yet. Uniform is black slacks, white button down, black vest, hair up, no jewelry. If you are there by 5, I can get you a badge. Thank you, Elena. Avery, she added, her voice dropping. Be careful. That crowd, they eat their own. I know, I said. I'm counting on it. With the infiltration secured, I checked in with Agent Harlow. I sent a secure message through the app. I am in. Asset will be on the floor as catering staff. Target creates a false sense of security. Do not breach until I give the visual signal. Harlow replied instantly. We are staging 2 miles out. We will move to the perimeter at 1900 hours. The visual signal is you taking the microphone, affirmative. I typed. Or if he tries to run, understood. We have eyes on the rear exits. Do not engage physically. Let the paper do the work. I closed the laptop. The plan was a machine, and I had just oiled the gears. Everything was ready. I ordered room service a club sandwich I barely touched and tried to sleep, but my mind was a projector, playing reels of the past. The rain, the car lights, the way my father's face looked when he told me I was a humiliation. I wondered what he would look like tomorrow. Would he look older? Would he look happy? My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was 11 at night. I frowned. Nobody called me this late. Marcus knew to use Signal. Harlow used the secure app. Elena wouldn't call back. It was an email notification. My personal email. The one I had kept since college. The one that was listed on public directories. I opened it. The sender was an encrypted address. A string of random characters that meant it was untraceable. The subject line was blank. I clicked open the message. There was no greeting, no signature, just one sentence, typed in plain text. If you read that letter in front of those people, you will destroy yourself, not him. I sat up in bed, the sheets falling away from my cold skin. My heart hammered against my ribs. If you read that letter, how did they know only 3 people knew I had the letter? Miles Ketter, the lawyer who gave it to me, Marcus, who helped me decode the files, and Agent Harlow. Harlow wouldn't threaten me. She wanted the arrest. Marcus was loyal. That left Miles Ketter. But the phrasing, "you will destroy yourself," it sounded like a warning, a desperate plea. Or was it someone else? Had I been watched at the bank? Had someone seen me take the box? The text message from my sister echoed in my mind. "You don't understand him." Was this Brielle? Did she know about the letter? Had Gordon told her paranoia, cold and sharp, began to creep into the room? I looked at the door of the hotel room. I had engaged the deadbolt, but suddenly it looked flimsy. I stood up and walked to the window, peering through the crack in the curtains. The parking lot was empty save for a few cars, no black SUVs, no figures in the shadows. But the email was real. Someone knew I was coming. Someone knew exactly what weapon I was carrying. I went back to the desk. I looked at the 3 piles of documents. If they knew I had the letter, they might be expecting me to walk in the front door. They might be planning to intercept me. They might have security waiting to search my bag for a stolen item, but they wouldn't be looking at the catering staff. They wouldn't be looking at the woman offering them champagne. I typed a reply to the anonymous email, though I knew it was futile. "Watch me." I hit send. Then I deleted the thread, powered down my phone, and placed the display portfolio into my garment bag, underneath the cheap black vest I had bought at a thrift store. The threat didn't deter me. If anything, it confirmed what I already suspected: the rot in Briar Glen went deep, and the fear was already spreading. They were afraid of the letter, which meant the letter was the key. Tomorrow, I wouldn't just read it, I would make them eat every word. The transformation from Avery Lewis, senior compliance investigator, to service staff member 4 took exactly 20 minutes in the cramped changing room of the Silver Pines Country Club. I pulled my hair back into a severe, tight bun, securing it with pins that scraped against my scalp. The uniform was a standard issue, stiff white button-down shirt that smelled faintly of industrial starch, black trousers that were slightly too short at the ankles, and a black vest that felt like a corset of anonymity. I placed the small, translucent earpiece into my left ear, tucking the wire down the back of my collar where it vanished under the vest. I taped the tiny microphone to the inside of my collar, just below my jawline. "Comms check," I whispered, barely moving my lips. "Read you 5 by 5. Agent Dana Harlow's voice crackled in my ear. She sounded close, though I knew she was in a surveillance van parked 2 miles down the service road. "We have eyes on the perimeter. The ballroom is filling up. Target is in the main foyer." "Copy," I said. "I am going in." I picked up a silver tray loaded with flutes of sparkling cider and stepped out of the service corridor. The transition was jarring. One moment, I was in a hallway that smelled of bleach and floor wax. The next, I was assaulted by the sensory overload of wealth. The ballroom of Silver Pines was a cavern of gold leaf and crystal. 3 massive chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting a warm, flattering light that made the jewelry of the guests sparkle like captured stars. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, roast beef, and the metallic tang of chilled champagne. It was a stark, violent contrast to the last time I had been in the presence of my father. That night, the air had smelled of diesel fumes and wet trash. The only light had been the flickering fluorescent buzz of a Greyhound station sign. That night, I had been shivering in a thin hoodie. Tonight, these people were wrapped in silk and cashmere, insulated from the cold realities of the world by layers of money, some of it, I now knew, stolen from the dead. I moved through the crowd with the practiced fluidity of a ghost. That is the power of a service uniform. It renders you transparent. People do not look at the help. They look at the tray. They look at the drink. They look past you to find someone more important to talk to. I circulated near the entrance, offering drinks, my eyes scanning the room, and then I saw him. Gordon Lewis stood near the center of the room, positioned perfectly beneath the central chandelier so that the light seemed to crown him. He looked infuriatingly well. His hair was a distinguished mane of silver, perfectly coiffed. He wore a navy bespoke suit that fit his broad shoulders as if he had been poured into it. He was holding a scotch glass, gesturing with his free hand. his face arranged in that familiar expression of humble authority. He was smiling. It was the smile that had fooled the county for 40 years. It was a smile that said, "I am here to serve. I am here to help." It was the smile of a predator who has convinced the sheep he is a shepherd. I felt a surge of nausea so strong I nearly dropped the tray. My grip tightened on the silver rim until my knuckles turned white. This man had poisoned my mother. He had erased my existence, and here he was, accepting backslaps and handshakes, glowing with the vitality of a life built on lies. "Easy, Avery," Harlow's voice whispered in my ear. She must have heard my breathing accelerate. "Stick to the plan. Do not engage yet." I forced my breathing to slow. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. I moved deeper into the room. I needed to gauge the layout. I needed to see the exits. A blur of blue silk rushed past me, nearly knocking the tray from my hand. "Excuse me?" a woman's voice snapped, stressed and high-pitched. "We need more hors d'oeuvres on table 6, please." I turned. It was Brielle. My sister looked frantic. She was wearing a floor-length gown of midnight blue, her hair cascading in soft waves over her shoulders. She was beautiful, undeniably so, but there was a tightness around her eyes, a brittleness to her movements. She was clutching a clipboard like a shield. She looked right at me. Her eyes met mine for a full second. I held my breath. I expected recognition. I expected her to gasp, to drop the clipboard, to scream my name. We shared the same nose, the same jawline. I was her sister. But Brielle just looked at my uniform, then at the tray. "Well," she said, impatient. "Table 6, go." She turned and marched away, diving back into the crowd to greet the mayor's wife. She did not know me. I was a stranger to her. The realization hit me with a dull ache. I had been gone so long, and I had been erased so thoroughly, that even my own flesh and blood saw only a black vest and a white shirt. To her, I wasn't Avery, I was just staff. "Understood, ma'am," I whispered to her retreating back. I made my way to table 6, placing the drinks down mechanically. As I moved through the tables, I became a spy in the house of my enemy. I listened. "Gordon is a saint," a woman with heavy diamonds was saying at table 4. "When my husband died, the paperwork for the benefits was a nightmare. Gordon personally walked it through the system. I don't know what I would have done without him." "He is the last of the old guard," a man replied, nodding solemnly. "Men of integrity. You don't find them anymore. The county is going to fall apart without him. I heard he is donating a portion of his retirement gift to the orphanage," another voice chimed in. Such a generous heart. Every compliment was a lash. Integrity, generous, saint. They were talking about a man who murdered his wife to keep his secrets. They were talking about a man who framed his teenage daughter for federal wire fraud. The disconnect between their perception and my reality was so vast it was dizzying. I wanted to scream. I wanted to overturn the table and shout the truth into their smiling faces. But I didn't. I let the anger condense into a cold, hard stone in my stomach. Let them praise him. The higher the pedestal, the longer the fall. I looped back toward the bar to refill my tray. I was near the heavy velvet curtains that covered the side exit when a hand gripped my upper arm. The grip was strong, painful. It was not a casual touch. I froze. "You have a lot of nerve," a male voice hissed in my ear. I turned slowly. Standing there was a man I did not recognize from the guest list, but I recognized the type. He was in his late 40s, wearing a suit that cost more than my car, with eyes that were flat and dead. He looked like a shark in human skin. This was not Miles Ketter, the regretful old lawyer. This was the cleaner. This was the muscle behind the legal briefs. "I beg your pardon, sir," I said, keeping my voice in the subservient register of a waitress. "Would you like a refill?" He didn't let go of my arm. He squeezed harder, his fingers digging into my bicep. He leaned in close, smelling of expensive mints and aggression. "Drop the act, Ms. Lewis," he said softly. "I know who you are. I saw the security footage from the bank yesterday. You look just like your mother." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I didn't flinch. "And who are you?" "I am the man who keeps Gordon's life tidy," he said. "My name is Julian Vance. I handle his liability mitigation." "Is that what you call it?" I asked, dropping the server persona. My voice went cold. "I call it being an accomplice to a felony," Vance smiled. But it didn't reach his eyes. "You think you are clever, walking in here with your little tray. You think you are going to storm the stage and have a movie moment? I am here to return something he lost," I said, "and to take back what he stole." "You are here to embarrass yourself," Vance countered. "We knew you would come." "Did you get the email?" "We warned you." "I don't scare easily. Mr. Vance." "You should," he said, "because Gordon is 2 steps ahead of you. He knows about the letter. He knows about the files. He has a story ready. Avery, a very convincing story about a drug-addicted daughter who has been harassing him for money for years. A daughter who forged documents to extort her dying father." I felt a chill run down my spine. That was the narrative. He was going to paint me as the villain. He was going to use my absence, the very absence he forced upon me, as proof of my instability. "Nobody will believe that," I said. "Look around." Vance gestured to the room with his free hand. "These people love him. They worship him. Who are they going to believe? The man who has signed their checks for 40 years, or the waitress who just walked in off the street?" He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Walk away, Avery. Go out that back door, get in your car, and drive back to Philadelphia. If you stay, you go to prison for extortion. Gordon has the police chief in his pocket. You won't even make it to the precinct." I looked him in the eye. "If he is so innocent, why are you shaking?" Vance blinked. He hadn't realized it, but his hand on my arm had a tremor. "I am not shaking," he snapped. "You are terrified," I said softly, "because you know what is in those files. You know that once the feds see the metadata, the police chief won't matter. You are not protecting him. Vance, you are trying to protect yourself." I yanked my arm free from his grip. "Tell him I'm coming," I said. "Tell him to smile while he can." Vance glared at me, his jaw working. For a second, I thought he might strike me, but we were in a public place. He straightened his jacket, shot me one last look of venom, and turned to walk toward the head table. "Harlow," I whispered into my mic, "I have been made. Hostile contact. Name is Julian Vance. He is Gordon's fixer." "We are moving up," Harlow replied instantly. "Hold your position. Do not let them isolate you." I didn't hold my position. I moved. I needed to be closer to the stage. The lights in the ballroom began to dim. The jazz band tapered off. A spotlight hit the small stage at the front of the room, illuminating a podium wrapped in a silver banner. The chatter died down. The guests turned their chairs. The air filled with that hushed anticipation of a main event. I stood in the shadows near the catering entrance, just 20 feet from the stage. I had a clear line of sight to Gordon. He was sitting at the center of the head table, flanked by the mayor and Brielle. He stood up. The room erupted in applause, a standing ovation before he had even spoken a word. He waved, humble and gracious, nodding to his admirers. He walked to the podium. He adjusted the microphone. He looked out over the sea of faces, his eyes misty with performed emotion. "Thank you," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "Thank you all. It has been the honor of my life to serve this county." He paused for effect. He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. I watched his hand. He pulled out an envelope. I stopped breathing. It was a thick envelope, cream-colored paper, old. The edges looked yellowed, artificially distressed. It looked exactly like the envelope I had in my pocket. The envelope containing my mother's letter. Gordon held it up. The light caught the paper. "Tonight," Gordon said, his voice trembling slightly, "I want to share something very personal, a letter from the past, a letter that explains the pain I have carried in silence for 16 years. My blood turned to ice. Vance wasn't lying. Gordon wasn't just going to deny my story, he was going to hijack it. He had forged a fake letter. He was going to read a fabricated confession, likely attributed to my mother or to me, that would inoculate him against the truth I held in my hands. He was going to use the prop of a letter to destroy the credibility of the real one. I looked at the microphone on the stand. It was live. I looked at the letter in his hand. I looked at the letter in my pocket. "Harlow," I said, my voice barely a breath. "He is about to kill the truth." "Move," Harlow commanded. "Go now." I dropped the silver tray. It hit the floor with a deafening crash of shattering glass. The room went silent. Every head turned toward the sound. Gordon looked up, annoyed by the interruption. He squinted into the darkness. I stepped out of the shadows. I walked into the pool of light from the chandelier. I didn't look like a server anymore. I looked like a soldier. "Don't read that, Gordon," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the silent room. He froze. His eyes widened. The fake smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second. Before the mask slammed back into place, I kept walking toward the stage. "Because we both know," I said, "that the real letter is in my pocket." The applause that greeted Gordon Lewis was not polite. It was rapturous. It rolled over the ballroom like a wave of physical force, vibrating the crystal flutes on the tables and shaking the floorboards beneath my sensible work shoes. The master of ceremonies, a red-faced councilman named Jim Daugherty, had just spent 10 minutes listing my father's accolades. He spoke of the modernized pension system, the surplus budget, and the streamlined claims process. He painted a portrait of a bureaucratic saint, and now, the saint was rising to speak. I stood frozen near the shattered remains of the tray I had dropped, breathing hard. The room had not yet registered why I had dropped it. They assumed it was a clumsy accident by an invisible servant. The spotlight was still glued to Gordon. He buttoned his jacket with a slow, deliberate movement that spoke of modesty, though I knew it was practiced theatricality. "Thank you," Gordon said, his voice catching in his throat perfectly. "Thank you. Jim, thank you. Everyone." He waited for the silence to become absolute. He knew how to work a room. He knew that silence was heavier than noise. "When I started this job 40 years ago," Gordon began, leaning into the podium, "I was a young man with a simple goal. I wanted to make sure that the people who built this county were taken care of when they could no longer build it themselves." He paused, looking down at his hands. "But public service comes at a cost," he continued, his voice dropping to a register of intimate confession. "It costs you time, it costs you sleep, and sometimes it costs you your family." I felt the blood in my veins turn to acid. I pressed my hand against the earpiece. "Hold, Avery." Harlow's voice was a tight wire in my ear. "Let him dig the hole." "He is rewriting history," I hissed back, my voice lost in the hush of the room. Gordon looked up, his eyes scanning the crowd with a tragic longing. "Many of you know that I lost my beloved Evelyn 30 years ago. She was the light of my life, but her death, it broke things in our home that could not be fixed. It cast a shadow over my eldest daughter. Avery." He said my name. He actually said my name. "Avery was a spirited child," Gordon said, a sad smile touching his lips. "But she was troubled. She could not handle the pressure of this life. She could not handle the grief. 16 years ago, she chose to leave us. She walked away from this family, from this town, to find her own path. I have prayed every night that she found peace, even though she refused my help, refused my calls, and refused my love." The room let out a collective, sympathetic sigh. A woman at table 4 dabbed her eyes with a napkin. I was shaking. The sheer magnitude of the lie was breathtaking. He was not just erasing his crime, he was turning his victimhood into a virtue. He was using my abandonment the night he threw me out into the rain like garbage as proof of his long-suffering patience. "But," Gordon said, his voice strengthening, "we do not dwell on the darkness. We move forward. However, before I close this chapter of my life, there is one final thing I need to do. One final ghost I need to lay to rest." He reached into his breast pocket and withdrew the envelope. It was the prop, the fake, the decoy Julian Vance had warned me about. "I found this letter recently," Gordon said, holding it up for the room to see. "It was written by my late wife, Evelyn, just days before she passed. I never had the strength to read it publicly until now, but in light of the rumors, in light of the whispers that sometimes circulate in small towns, I feel I owe it to her memory to read it." He opened the envelope. He unfolded the paper. "She wrote this to Avery," Gordon said. "She wrote, 'My dear daughter, I know you are angry. I know you have a darkness in you that frightens me. Please, listen to your father. He is trying to save you from yourself.'" The words hit me like physical blows. He was using my dead mother to gaslight a room of 180 people. He was putting words in her mouth that she would never have spoken. He was desecrating the only thing I had left of her. "Target is engaging in active defamation," Harlow said in my ear. "We are moving. Do not let him finish." I did not need the order. I stepped out of the shadows. I did not walk like a server anymore. I walked with the stride of an executioner. The sound of my heels striking the hardwood floor echoed in the silence between Gordon's sentences. "He loves you so much," Gordon read, pretending to choke up. "And I am afraid that your instability will—" "That is a lie." My voice rang out, sharp and clear, cutting through the warm air of the ballroom like a knife. Gordon stopped. He looked up, blinking into the glare of the spotlight. The guests turned in their seats, craning their necks. I kept walking. I was 10 feet from the stage. "That letter is a fake," I said, my voice rising. "And you know it." Julian Vance appeared from the side of the stage, moving to intercept me. "Security!" he barked. "Get this woman out of here." But I was faster. I didn't hesitate. I vaulted onto the low stage. Ignoring the stairs, Vance grabbed for my arm, but I twisted away, driven by an adrenaline that felt like lightning. I reached the podium before Gordon could react. I grabbed the neck of the microphone stand and yanked it down toward me. The feedback squealed, a high-pitched shriek that made half the room cover their ears. "My mother never wrote that," I said into the mic, my voice booming through the massive speakers. Gordon stared at me. For a second, he looked truly terrified. Then, the mask slammed back down. He chuckled, a condescending, pitying sound. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, leaning toward the mic, trying to share it with me. "I apologize. This is exactly what I was talking about. This is the tragedy of addiction." He looked at me with eyes that were hard as flint. "You need help, miss. You are making a scene." I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the mayor. I saw the judges. I saw my sister, Brielle, standing near the edge of the stage, her face pale as parchment. "I don't need help," I said, staring directly into the camera of a local news crew that was broadcasting the event. "I need you to listen." I took a breath that filled my lungs with the expensive air of the Silver Pines Country Club. "My name is Avery Lewis," I said. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the silence of a held breath. "I am the daughter you just claimed ran away," I continued. "I am the daughter you drove to the Greyhound station on October 14th, 16 years ago. I am the daughter you left with a trash bag of clothes because you said I humiliated this family." "Security!" Gordon roared, losing his composure. "Get her off the stage. She is delusional." 2 uniformed guards started running from the back of the room. I turned to look at Brielle. She was staring at me, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open. In her hand, she held a crystal wine glass. As our eyes locked, her fingers went slack. The glass hit the floor. Crash. The sound was shockingly loud. Red wine splattered across the hem of her midnight blue dress like arterial spray. "Brielle," Gordon snapped, distracted. "Don't listen to her. She is sick." "I am not sick, Dad," I said, using the word like a weapon. "I am the most sober person in this room." Gordon turned on me, his face twisting into a snarl that the audience couldn't quite see from their angle. But I saw it. It was the face of the man in the rain. "You ungrateful little brat," he hissed, away from the mic. "You came here to ruin my night. You think anyone will believe you over me? I am Gordon Lewis. You are a waitress." "I am a compliance investigator," I corrected him, my voice amplified for the whole room to hear. "And I didn't come here to ruin your night. I came to end your career." Gordon laughed, but it sounded brittle. "With what story's tears?" He held up the fake letter again, waving it at the crowd. "I have her mother's dying words right here. This girl is mentally unstable." I reached into the inside pocket of my cheap black vest. I felt the thick, yellowed paper. It felt warm against my fingers. I pulled it out. The room gasped. It was visually identical to the one Gordon was holding, but where his was crisp and clean, mine was stained with age. Mine bore the heavy wax seal of a dead woman. "No, Gordon," I said. I held the letter up high, letting the stage lights catch the faded ink. "You are holding a prop," I said. "I am holding the confession." I leaned into the microphone, my eyes locking with his. "I am here to read the letter you hid from everyone," I said. "The letter that proves you didn't just abandon your daughter. You used her name to steal $4 million. The ballroom was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the air conditioning system and the frantic, shallow breathing of the man standing 5 feet away from me. I held the letter with both hands. My fingers were steady. The paper felt fragile, like dried skin, but the words written on it were heavy enough to crush the life out of the room. I looked down at the faded blue ink. My mother's handwriting. It was the same handwriting that had taught me to write my name, the same handwriting that had signed my report cards. Now, it was testifying from the grave. "My name is Evelyn Lewis," I read into the microphone. My voice echoed off the vaulted ceiling, stripping away the warmth of the chandelier light. "And if you are reading this, I have failed to protect you." Gordon lunged forward, his face a mask of panic. "Don't you dare!" he hissed, reaching for the paper. I stepped back, keeping the microphone stand between us. "She continues," I said, my voice rising over his protest. "I have discovered that my husband, Gordon Lewis, has been systematically altering the pension records of the Hartwell County Benefits Office. He has created 3 shell companies under the names Briar Glen Actuarial, Keystone Consulting, and Pinnacle Case Management." A gasp rippled through the front row. These were the names of vendors the county had been paying for decades. The mayor, sitting at table 1, went pale. He knew those names. He had signed off on budgets including those names. I continued reading, my eyes scanning the next paragraph. When I confronted him, he told me that I was hysterical. He told me that if I went to the police, I would have an accident. He told me that he owns the sheriff. He told me that he would take my children away and put them in state care where I would never see them again. "She was sick," Gordon shouted, turning to the crowd, his arms spread wide in a plea for understanding. "She was paranoid. The medication made her hallucinate." I ignored him. I read the next line, the one that had been burning a hole in my pocket all night. "But the worst thing," I read, slowing down to ensure every syllable landed like a hammer blow, "is his plan for Avery." The room seemed to lean in. "He is waiting," I read. "He is waiting for her birthday. He told me that he cannot use her name on the accounts until she is a legal adult. He needs a clean identity to anchor the offshore transfers. If he abandons you, Avery, if he sends you away on the very day you turn 18, it is not because you are bad. It is because from that second onward, you are old enough to be his accomplice without your consent." I lowered the paper. I looked directly at the crowd. "October 14th, I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "That was the day he drove me to the bus station. That was the day I turned 18. That was the day my signature appeared on a transfer form moving $50,000 into a ghost account." "Liar!" Gordon screamed. His voice cracked. Losing its polished baritone, he sounded like a cornered animal. "This is defamation. You are slandering a public servant. I will have you arrested. I will sue you for every penny you don't have." He looked toward Julian Vance, who was standing at the edge of the stage, looking ready to tackle me. "Get her off the stage. Now." "You want proof?" I asked. I didn't wait for an answer. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my smartphone. I had already synced it to the Bluetooth receiver of the podium's audiovisual system, while Gordon was giving his speech a simple vulnerability in the setup that Marcus had pointed out to me earlier. I tapped the screen. Behind me, the massive projection screen that had been displaying a slideshow of Gordon's greatest moments, shaking hands with senators, cutting ribbons, kissing babies flickered. The image of a smiling Gordon vanished. In its place, a massive, high-contrast QR code appeared. It was 10 feet tall, black and white, stark and undeniable. "Scan it," I commanded the room. For a second, nobody moved. Then, the curiosity, the morbid human need to see the car crash took over. A young woman at table 3 held up her phone, then a man at table 5, then a dozen people. "What is that?" Gordon yelled, turning to look at the screen. "Turn it off. Cut the power." "That," I said, pointing to the screen, "is the truth. That link leads to a secure server containing 3,000 pages of scanned ledgers, bank transfer logs, and the metadata from the Hartwell County server. It contains the change of beneficiary forms with my forged signature. It contains the email chains between you and your offshore bankers." I watched the room. The transformation was immediate and brutal. The phones were out. People were scrolling. I saw eyebrows raise. I saw jaws drop. I saw the whispering start, a low buzz that sounded like a hive of angry bees. "Oh my God," someone at the back said loudly. "It's all here. The dates match." "Look at the amounts," another voice said. $6,000 a week, for 10 years. Gordon turned back to me. His face was purple. The veins in his neck were bulging. He looked like he was about to have a stroke. Or kill me. Perhaps both. "You verified these files," he snarled. "You hacked the county system. That is a federal crime." "I didn't hack anything," I said calmly. "I just opened the box you forgot to burn." Julian Vance jumped onto the stage. He moved fast, closing the distance between us in 2 strides. He reached for the microphone, his hand clamping over the top of it. "That is enough," Vance said, his voice low and threatening. "The show is over. You are coming with me." He tried to wrench the mic from my hand, but I held on. I leaned in close to him, so close I could see the pores on his nose. "If you touch me again," I said into the mic, ensuring the struggle was audible to everyone, "I will tell them about page 402 of the dossier." Vance froze. His eyes flicked to the screen behind us. "I have your signature. Julian," I said. "On the incorporation papers for Briar Glen Actuarial. You are the registered agent. You aren't just his lawyer. You are his co-conspirator. The FBI has the file. If you touch me, you add assault to a RICO indictment." Vance's hand went slack. He looked at Gordon, then back at me. He did the math. He realized that loyalty to Gordon Lewis was a currency that had just been devalued to 0. He stepped back, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. "I am just legal counsel," Vance muttered, loud enough for the microphone to catch. "I advised against this." "Traitor!" Gordon shouted at him. "You coward!" Gordon was alone now. The stage was huge, and he looked tiny in the middle of it. The adulation of the crowd had evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard scrutiny of a jury. "Dad," the word came from the side of the stage. It was small, broken, and terrified. We all turned. Brielle was standing there. Her dress was stained with wine, looking like a dark bruise spreading across the fabric. She was looking at her father, her eyes searching his face for a denial that wasn't coming. "Dad," she said again, her voice shaking. "Tell them it isn't true. Tell them you didn't use Avery's name." Gordon looked at her. For a fleeting second, I thought I saw shame. I thought I saw the father he pretended to be. But then, the survival instinct took over. He realized Brielle was wavering. He realized he was losing his last ally. "Shut up, Brielle," he snapped. The venom in his voice was shocking. It was the tone one uses with a disobedient dog. "Don't be stupid. She is manipulating you. Go sit down." Brielle recoiled as if he had slapped her. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The image of the doting father and the perfect daughter shattered right there on the stage, leaving jagged shards on the floor. "You used me too," Brielle whispered. The realization dawned on her face, horrific and slow. "The papers you made me sign last week? The trust fund transfer? You said it was for tax purposes." Gordon took a step toward her, his hand raised. I said, "Sit down." "Don't you take another step," I warned him. My voice was ice. I looked at my sister. I didn't see the girl who had watched me leave. I saw another victim in the making. "He was going to do it to you too, Brielle," I said softly. "He was cashing out. He was going to leave you with the debt and the questions, just like he left me with the trash bag." Gordon looked around the room. The guests were standing now. Some were leaving, rushing for the exits to avoid the scandal. Others were filming. The facade was gone. The retirement party had become a crime scene. I raised the letter one last time. I had one more line to read. The nail in the coffin. "You can deny the digital files," I said to Gordon. "You can claim I hacked them. You can claim I forged them, but you cannot deny physical gravity." I read the final sentence of my mother's letter. "I have left a safety deposit box key," I read. "In it, you will find the original bank books, the carbon copies of the transfers, and the tape recording I made of him threatening me. It is evidence he cannot delete. It is evidence he cannot spin. It is the truth, preserved in steel." I lowered the paper. I looked at the man who had been my father. "I gave the key to the FBI this morning," I said. "They opened the box at noon." Gordon's face went gray. The fight drained out of him. He knew what was in that box. He knew that unlike digital logs, physical tape recordings from 1994 could not be faked by a hacker. He knew he was done. "You," he whispered. "You ungrateful." "I am not ungrateful," I said. "I am thankful. Thankful that you taught me exactly who you were at the bus station. If you had hugged me that night, I might have forgiven you, and that would have been a tragedy." I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a thud that sounded like a gavel coming down. The microphone rolling across the stage floor sounded like thunder in the cavernous silence of the ballroom. I stood with my arms at my sides, my chest heaving, waiting for the inevitable explosion. In my left ear, the voice of Agent Dana Harlow was a constant, grounding presence, cutting through the adrenaline that threatened to make my knees buckle. "Hold your position, Avery," Harlow commanded, her voice tight with professional tension. "We are at the doors. We have the perimeter sealed, but do not engage him physically. We need him to break. We need the active intent." I understood. The file I had just displayed. The letter I had read it was all damning evidence of past crimes. But for a federal case to stick without bail, for us to ensure he didn't slip away to a non-extradition country on a private jet within the hour, we needed to catch him in the act of finalizing the theft. We needed him to show his hand one last time. Gordon Lewis looked at me, and for a moment, I saw the sheer, unadulterated hatred in his eyes. It was a look of total annihilation, but then, his decades of training as a politician and a manipulator kicked in. He realized that anger made him look guilty, while frailty made him look like a victim. He staggered back, clutching his chest with his left hand. He let out a gasp that was perfectly calibrated to be amplified by the lapel microphone he was still wearing. "My heart," he groaned, stumbling against the podium. "She is killing me." The room shifted instantly. The wealthy donors and local officials, who had been whispering in horror just seconds ago, now surged forward on a wave of instinctual sympathy. "He is having a heart attack," a woman in the front row screamed. "Get a doctor," someone else shouted. Gordon slumped against the wood, his face contorted in a grimace of pain. He pointed a trembling finger at me. "She is doing this," he wheezed, his voice breathless and tragic. "She came here to destroy a dying man. She is mentally ill. She has been harassing me for money for years." I watched him perform. It was a masterclass. He was weaponizing his own mortality to deflect from his criminality. "Don't fall for it," I said, my voice projecting without the mic, but it was lost in the rising din of the crowd. "Get her out of here," the mayor shouted, standing up and pointing at me. "This is shameful security." Two large men in black suits, Silver Pine security, not the police, started toward the stage. They looked angry. They didn't see a whistleblower. They saw a woman assaulting a pillar of the community. Gordon, seeing the tide turn in his favor, decided to play his ace. He didn't just want sympathy. He wanted to bury me legally before the police arrived. He reached into his pocket, not for nitroglycerin pills, but for his phone. "I didn't want to do this," Gordon sobbed, holding the phone up to his lapel mic. "I wanted to protect her dignity, but you leave me no choice. Avery, they need to know what you really are." He tapped the screen. A recording blared through the ballroom speakers. It was my voice. There was no mistaking the timbre, the cadence. "I want the money, Dad. If you don't give me what is mine, I will destroy you. I will burn your reputation to the ground. I don't care about the truth. I just want the cash." The room gasped. The guests looked at me with renewed disgust. To them, it was a smoking gun, a confession of extortion. I stood completely still. I remembered that conversation. It was from a phone call 3 years ago, when I had called him to ask for a copy of my birth certificate so I could get a passport. He had recorded it, and he had butchered it. "That is a lie," I said, though nobody was listening. "You hear that?" Gordon cried out, straightening up, his heart attack miraculously forgotten in his zeal to prosecute me. "She admits it. She is an extortionist. Arrest her." "Harlow," I whispered. "Now. Go," Harlow said. "Drop the hammer." I raised my phone again. I had anticipated this. A man like Gordon never throws anything away. But he also never understands metadata. He thought audio was just sound. He didn't realize it was code. "Stop," I shouted, my voice cutting through the murmurs. I held my phone up to the projection screen. "Listen to the timestamps." I hit a button on my screen. The visual on the large projector behind Gordon changed. It wasn't a QR code anymore. It was a waveform analysis, a visual representation of sound, split into colored blocks. "He played you a remix," I announced. "That recording is spliced from 4 different calls. Look at the screen. The red blocks are from 2010. The blue blocks are from last week. And the silence in between, that is where he cut out his own voice." I tapped play on my version, the cloud backup I had retrieved from his own hacked server logs, courtesy of Marcus. The speakers crackled, and the real conversation played. "I want the money, Dad," my voice said, sounding younger, desperate. "I worked double shifts at the diner. I earned that money. If you don't give me what is mine, I can't pay tuition." Then, Gordon's voice, cold and sneering, "If you try to leave, I will destroy you. I will burn your reputation to the ground. You are nothing without me." The edit was obvious. He had taken his threats and put them in my mouth. He had taken my plea for wages and turned it into a demand for a payout. The room fell silent again. The whiplash was disorienting. The guests looked from the screen to Gordon, who was standing perfectly upright, his hand no longer clutching his chest. "It's a deep fake," Gordon stammered, his eyes darting around the room. "She is using AI. She is a witch." But the spell was broken. The technology was too precise. The visual evidence too overwhelming. Gordon panicked. He realized the narrative was lost. He realized the heart attack hadn't worked, and the blackmail tape had backfired. He reverted to brute force. "Vance," he screamed at his lawyer, "get security. Get her off the stage. I want her in handcuffs." The guards rushed the stage stairs. I braced myself. I wasn't a fighter. I was an analyst. If they grabbed me, they could drag me out before the FBI made their entrance. "Don't touch her." The scream didn't come from me. It came from Brielle. My sister threw herself between me and the security guards. She stood at the edge of the stage, her arms spread wide, her blue dress ruined by wine, her face streaked with tears. But she wasn't crying anymore. She was furious. "Stop it!" Brielle yelled at the guards. "Don't you touch my sister!" She turned to face our father. Her hands were shaking, but she pointed an accusatory finger right at his face. "You made me sign it," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of horror and realization. "Before the party, in the green room, you gave me a stack of papers. You said it was for the catering liability. You said it was for the flower arrangements." Gordon's face went white. "Brielle, shut up. Go to the car." "I signed it," Brielle screamed, looking at the audience, desperate for someone to understand. "I signed a document authorizing a wire transfer. I saw the bank name, Sovereign Keystone. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was for the party expenses." I froze. My blood ran cold. "Brielle?" I asked, stepping toward her. "What was the amount?" "Did you see the amount?" "It wasn't for flowers," Brielle sobbed. "It was for the balance. The box said total remaining balance, and the destination account it was in the Cayman Islands." "Harlow!" I shouted into my mic, not caring who heard. "He executed the transfer. He used Brielle to sign the release 10 minutes ago. The money is moving." "We have him," Harlow's voice roared in my ear. "Breaching now! Get down! Avery!" Gordon looked at Brielle, and the look he gave her was one of pure disgust. "You stupid girl," he snarled. "You ruined everything." Then he moved. He didn't move like an old man. He moved like a fugitive. He spun around and sprinted toward the rear of the stage, heading for the service exit that led to the kitchen and the loading dock. "He is running," I shouted. At that exact second, the double doors at the main entrance of the ballroom exploded open. "Federal agents!" The voice was amplified by a bullhorn. 12 agents in tactical gear with FBI windbreakers poured into the room, their weapons drawn but lowered. "Everyone stay down. Nobody move." The ballroom erupted into chaos. It was a scene of absolute bedlam. Socialites in evening gowns dove under tables. Waiters dropped trays of food. People screamed. Flashbulbs went off as guests instinctively raised their phones to record the raid. I didn't duck. I ran. I ran across the stage, following Gordon. I wasn't going to tackle him, Harlow had been clear about that, but I wasn't going to let him vanish into the kitchen labyrinth. I needed eyes on him. Gordon reached the heavy velvet curtains at the back of the stage. He shoved them aside and fumbled with the handle of the emergency exit door. It was locked. He slammed his shoulder against it. It didn't budge. He had locked it himself earlier in the day to prevent staff from sneaking in. A detail of his own controlling nature that had just sealed his fate. He spun around, his back against the door. Trapped. I stopped 10 feet away from him. "It is over, Gordon," I said, breathing hard. "The transfer will be flagged. The accounts are frozen. Harlow was monitoring the SWIFT network. You didn't move the money. You just signed your confession." Gordon stared at me. He looked stripped down to his essence. The benevolent public servant was gone. The grieving widower was gone. All that was left was a small, greedy man in an expensive suit. The side doors burst open. Agent Harlow and 4 other agents swarmed onto the stage, their guns trained on Gordon. "Gordon Lewis," Harlow shouted. "Hands where I can see them. You are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering." Gordon didn't raise his hands immediately. He looked at the agents. Then he looked at the crowd of people peering over the edge of the stage, filming him. He looked at Brielle, who was sobbing into her hands. Then he looked at me. A slow, chilling smile spread across his face. It wasn't a smile of defeat. It was a smile of a man who knows a secret that makes the handcuffs irrelevant. He raised his hands slowly. As the agents moved in to secure him, he didn't look at them. He kept his eyes locked on mine. Harlow grabbed his arm, spinning him around to cuff him. "You have the right to remain silent," she began reciting. Gordon twisted his head back, ignoring the officer, ignoring the Miranda rights. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into me with a malicious intensity that made the hair on my arms stand up. "You think you won," he whispered, his voice low but cutting through the noise of the raid like a razor blade. I stepped closer. compelled by a dread I couldn't name. "It is finished, Dad." "Nothing is finished," he hissed, his lips barely moving. "You checked the accounts. You checked the signatures. But you didn't check the insurance policy." He laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "I knew this day might come," he said, his voice dropping to a terrifying murmur. "I prepared a scapegoat. Avery. A real one. Not me. Not Brielle." His eyes flicked past me. He wasn't looking at the crowd. He wasn't looking at the exit. He was looking directly at my purse, which I had left on the podium when I grabbed the mic. "Check your trunk," he whispered. The agents yanked him away, pulling him toward the stairs. "Move now." But the words hung in the air between us, heavy and poisonous. "Check your trunk." I stood frozen on the stage as the flashbulbs popped and the agents shouted orders. The victory I had planned, the clean, administrative revenge I had designed, suddenly felt very fragile. I looked at my purse. Then I looked at the exit where my car was parked. Gordon was laughing as they dragged him out. The double doors at the rear of the stage, which Gordon Lewis had so desperately tried to batter down, swung open. But it was not freedom that awaited him on the other side. It was a wall of federal agents. Agent Dana Harlow stepped through the breach, her badge catching the harsh glare of the stage lights. She did not yell. She did not need to. Her presence sucked the oxygen out of the room, turning the chaotic panic of the guests into a terrified stillness. She walked straight up to my father, who was pressed against the exit door like a trapped rat, sweating through his expensive Italian suit. Gordon looked at her. Then he looked at the agents flanking her. And finally, he looked back at the crowd. He was searching for a friendly face, a judge he had played golf with, a councilman he had funded. But the faces staring back at him were pale and averted. The herd was cutting its losses. "Gordon Lewis," Harlow said, her voice flat and bored, the voice of a woman who had seen 1,000 men like him crumble. "I am executing a federal warrant for your arrest. The charges include wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, money laundering, and embezzlement of public funds." Gordon tried to straighten his jacket. He tried to summon the ghost of his authority. "This is a mistake," he bellowed, though his voice cracked on the last syllable. "You are making a scene based on the ravings of a lunatic. My daughter is mentally unstable. She forged those files. She is trying to frame me because I cut her off." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "Check her medical history. She is a drug addict. She is lying." Harlow didn't even blink. She reached into her tactical vest and pulled out a clear evidence bag. Inside was the chunky, scratched USB drive I had retrieved from the bank. "We did not just get the files from your daughter, Mr. Lewis," Harlow said, holding the bag up so the cameras in the room could catch it. "We got the original server logs from the Hartwell County backup. We matched the IP addresses. We have the metadata from the bank transfers. And most importantly, we have the contents of safety deposit box 402. Gordon stopped breathing. The color drained from his face so fast, he looked like a corpse standing upright. "You said she was lying," Harlow continued, stepping closer to him. "You said she was crazy. But the tape recording in that box, the one your wife made in 1994, tells a different story. We have a forensic voice match. Gordon, we have you on tape threatening to kill Evelyn if she exposed the accounts." The crowd let out a collective, horrified gasp. The mention of Evelyn, the saintly, departed wife he had mourned publicly for 3 decades, was the final blow to his image. "It is not real," Gordon whispered, but the fight was gone. Harlow signaled to her team. 2 agents moved in. Grabbing Gordon's arms, they were not gentle. They pulled his wrists behind his back. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was sharp and metallic, echoing through the silent ballroom. It was the sound of a 40-year career ending in steel. As they secured him, Harlow turned to address the room. She wasn't doing it for the guests. She was doing it for the record. "We are also seizing all electronic devices on your person," Harlow said, pulling Gordon's phone from his pocket and dropping it into a Faraday bag to block any remote wiping signals. "And as of 5 minutes ago, The United States Department of Justice has issued a freeze order on the account at Sovereign Keystone Bank in the Cayman Islands. Gordon's knees buckled. The agents had to hold him up. That was it. The money. The millions he had stolen. The nest egg he had destroyed his family to build. The golden parachute he was planning to open tonight, it was gone. He was not just going to prison, he was going to prison broke. Harlow turned her gaze to me. She gave me a nearly imperceptible nod. Then she looked back at Gordon. "And just so you know," Harlow said, loud enough for the press to hear, "we know why you did it. We know why you kicked Avery out on her 18th birthday." Gordon looked up, his eyes glassy. "You didn't kick her out because she was a bad kid," Harlow said, dissecting him with words. "You kicked her out because you needed her social security number to be active, but you needed her physically absent. You needed a ghost. You knew that if she was living on the street, struggling to eat, she would never check her credit score. You knew she would never see the bank statements. You preyed on her vulnerability. You made your own daughter homeless so you could use her name as a shield." That was the twist that finally broke the room. I saw the faces of the people who had judged me for 16 years, the neighbors who thought I was a runaway, the teachers who thought I was a dropout. I saw the realization hit them. They hadn't been watching a tragedy of rebellion. They had been watching a slow-motion human sacrifice. Gordon tried to speak, but only a dry croak came out. Then, Brielle stepped forward. She was still standing near the edge of the stage, her face a ruin of mascara and tears. But she looked stronger than she had ever looked in her life. She walked past the stunned security guards and approached the federal agents. "He lied to me too," Brielle said clearly. Gordon whipped his head around. "Brielle, do not say a word," he shouted. "He told me the papers were for the party," Brielle said to Harlow, ignoring him. "He told me I was signing a liability waiver. But he made me sign the wire transfer. He used me to move the money. I will testify. I will tell you everything he said in the green room." That was the seal. If there had been any doubt about Gordon's intent, any chance his lawyers could argue it was a clerical error, Brielle just destroyed it. She confirmed the mens rea, the guilty mind. He had actively deceived his family to execute the fraud. The agents began to drag Gordon toward the exit. The guests, the elite of Briar Glen, recoiled as he passed. Men who had shaken his hand an hour ago pulled their jackets tight. Terrified of being associated with him, women turned their backs. The path to the door became a gauntlet of rejection. The man they had called the pillar of the community was now just a contagion they wanted to wash off. "Wait," I said. The agents paused. I walked over to Dana Harlow. My hands were empty now, except for the single sheet of yellowed paper, the original letter, the paper that had started this war. "This belongs to you," I said, handing the letter to Harlow. "It is evidence. Chain of custody." Harlow took the letter carefully, placing it in a protective sleeve. "We will keep it safe, Avery. I promise." "I know you will," I said. "I kept a copy, just for me." I didn't keep the copy for legal reasons. I kept it because I needed to look at it on the days when the doubt crept in. I needed to remind myself that I wasn't the crazy one. I wasn't the failure. I was the girl who survived. Gordon twisted his body, fighting the grip of the agents one last time. He wasn't trying to escape. He was trying to look at me. For 16 years, he had looked through me. He had looked past me. He had looked at me with indifference or disdain. But now, as he stood in cuffs, stripped of his power, stripped of his money, and stripped of his lies, he finally saw me. He looked at the woman in the cheap server's vest who had just dismantled his entire life with nothing but paper and patience. He opened his mouth to speak. Perhaps he wanted to curse me. Perhaps he wanted to beg. Perhaps he wanted to play the father card one last time. But he didn't get the chance. "Let's go," the agent barked, shoving him through the door. Gordon Lewis vanished into the night, flanked by the law, leaving nothing behind but the shattered remains of his reputation. The ballroom was still buzzing, but the sound was different now. It wasn't the hum of a party. It was the hum of an autopsy. People were dissecting what had just happened. They were already rewriting their own histories, telling each other they had always suspected something was off about Gordon. I didn't care. I didn't want their apologies. I didn't want their validation. I turned to Brielle. She was standing alone, shivering in her ruined dress. "I didn't know, Avery," she whispered. "I swear to God, I didn't know." I looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes, the same fear I had felt at 18. She was going to have a hard time. The assets would be seized. The house would probably be sold to pay restitution. She was about to learn what it meant to start from zero. "I know," I said, "but you are going to be okay. You are free of him now." I didn't hug her. We weren't there yet. Too much time had passed. Too many walls had been built. But I didn't hate her anymore. She was just another casualty. "Call me," I said. "When this is over, if you need a lawyer who isn't on his payroll, I know a few." I walked off the stage. I walked past the overturned tables and the spilled wine. I walked past Julian Vance, who was sitting on a chair with his head in his hands, waiting for his own arrest warrant to arrive. I pushed open the heavy oak doors of the Silver Pines Country Club and stepped out into the night. The air outside was biting cold. The wind whipped my hair across my face, stinging my cheeks. It was the kind of cold that wakes you up. I walked to my car. I didn't check the trunk. I knew it was empty. Gordon's threat had been a lie, a final, desperate phantom to make me hesitate. There was no body in the trunk. There was no scapegoat. There was only him. I sat in the driver's seat and closed the door, sealing out the noise of the sirens that were now converging on the club. I looked at the passenger seat. The copy of the letter was there. I expected to feel happy. I expected a surge of triumph, a cinematic moment of fist-pumping victory, but there was none of that. There was only silence. My chest felt lighter. Yes, the heavy stone of injustice that I had carried for 16 years was gone, but in its place was just a quiet, vast emptiness. I had spent my entire adult life fueling myself with rage. I had built my career, my personality, and my survival on the bedrock of this revenge. Now, it was done. I was 34 years old. I was alone in a car in Pennsylvania. I had no parents. I had a sister I barely knew. I had a job waiting for me in Philadelphia that involved spreadsheets and fraud. But for the first time since I was 18, the road ahead wasn't blocked by a shadow. The monster was in a cage. The ghost of my mother could rest. I started the engine. The heater kicked on, blowing warm air over my cold hands. "Goodbye, Dad," I whispered to the rearview mirror. I put the car in gear and drove away from the lights of the country club, heading back toward the highway, back toward the city, back toward a life that finally, truly, belonged to me. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment down below with your country or city. Let's see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed this tale of justice served cold, please make sure to subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like this video, and smash that hype button to help us share these stories with more people. See you in the next one.